Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Teresa's Crafty Cabana. This week I am working on a video that has more prints for some man cards or guy cards that I wanted to work on, and I had a lot of pinks and purples in my print stash, and so I wanted to make something that had more neutral colors, blues, greens, and then some gears and stuff like that I think would look good as a print for some guy cards. Now, to get started, I didn't have the guy colors and the guy textures. I was just trying to get started printing. I wanted to test out to see if I could do a layer of some acrylic paint, and then over the top of that I put down some alcohol inks and then another layer of acrylic paint. So this first print is just me practicing and testing out my layering just to see, because I've had issues in the past with layering alcohol inks on top of acrylic paint, and I don't know if it's the brand of paint that I use or if it's just all acrylic paints. And so I used a higher quality paint. It was not professional grade, but the acrylics were definitely a higher end than the craft paints, for example, and they seemed to hold up pretty well. I had put down the alcohol blending solution, and then I used my alcohol inks, and I even used a little bit of an alcohol pearl, and then I used this texture. It's just it's called a canvas, a plastic canvas from Dollar Tree, and that's supposed to be used for yarn, but I used that for my texture on the alcohol ink, and then I let that dry, and for my final layer I used Parchment, which is an off-white, and just pulled my whole print with the white color. And after it dried, everything came up nice, and I got a lot of the interesting part for me was some of the alcohol ink tinted the pink color, or the pink layer, and you could see the pink kind of mixing with the blues and the greens in the background, which I thought was really interesting. So now I'm ready to start the more manly looking prints, and I have these keyhole orifices. These are designed by Becky Bokern from it's sold at PM Artist Studio, so this stencil is, and I'll link that in the description. But I thought this would be a good stencil start, and then on top of this I'll layer in some of my gears and stuff. And since this is a smaller stencil, I just did half of the gel print and then used my this is just an embossed piece of cardstock. I had only a small gear embossed piece, so I embossed this piece of cardstock 3 times, so there is a little bit of a line in between these, but I really wanted the gears to kind of be a little bit longer than the little tiny embossing folder that I had, and so I did it this way. On the bottom part of this one I just mixed in a little bit of black with the gray, and again I'm still just trying to test out different paints. One of the paints, the gray, was more of like a level 2, whereas the black was a little bit of a higher professional level. And on these I had added a lot more texture into these, so there was not a lot of paint left. And what I noticed is as I was adding in my alcohol inks in the blending solution over the gray area, the gray definitely started to dissolve very quickly. But on the black side, they didn't dissolve quite as quickly. I was trying to add in enough color to at least put some color into the background, but the more that I was adding, the more it seemed to deteriorate the paint layer that I had on there, so I just kind of stopped there. And then for my texture on the alcohol ink layer, I used this mesh. It's just like a diamond mesh. And for my paint over the top of this one, I used a titanium white. I always like using a white or light color over my alcohol inks because they are transparent. If I use a dark color, they'll definitely mix in with the color that I put over the back of it. And a lot of times the full vibrancy just kind of gets lost if I don't use a white. So I liked how it looked, but it was definitely missing a lot of that stenciling that I had done. So I wanted to put a layer over the top instead. And to do that, I mixed some black, and I have a burnt sienna and a raw umber in this background layer here. And then I just used my gears, and I pressed in really well because I wanted to remove quite a bit of the black. I had cut this piece out of cardstock using my Silhouette Cameo, just like some gear parts. So I used that to try to remove a little bit more of that black paint. I didn't want to completely cover up my print, but I wanted to have just a little bit more of that dark area where it looked like I had the gears. So I just layered that print right over the top while the paint was still wet, and I didn't leave it to dry. I just put it on a few seconds and pulled it off so it left some paint behind on the plate. And then I got a little more texture, and I like how the gears kind of pop from the colors. For the next print, I wanted to start with some browns. I have like a gray brown and a raw umber. I just blended those out. This is just a piece of paper cardstock that I folded in half, just a strip, and then I snipped away like different areas all the way around one side of it, and that way I could kind of create like a circle, but it's like an off circle. You can make it whatever shape kind of. So I just used that to add a little more of a texture. And then I found some pieces. I have this is something you would put on the wall to hang something. I'm not really using it for anything. I just had it in a drawer, like a junk drawer. So I thought I would use it for jelly printing. I like the lines on it and the little circle. Then these are some old keys that don't work anymore. So I thought I would gel print with these on the background here too. To press it in, I used this, it was another kind of a mesh that I had. So I thought that way I could really press down on these and not get my fingerprints all over the gel plate. These are some paper gears that I had also cut out of my Silhouette Cameo. And once this layer dried, I added in my alcohol inks once again. And I'm mostly working with blue colors, like turquoise kind of colors, some greens, light greens, and then yellows, and I popped some oranges in there for a little bit of contrast. This time I added the gears to the alcohol ink layer, and it did remove some of the paint layer, but I was okay with that because I still wanted to reveal some of the plate. And so I came back in and added more color in the areas that it pulled away too much of the paint. I found some old screws and bolts and things like that besides the keys, so I used the screws, the sides of them, the tops of them, and just kind of used them in those areas that had the alcohol ink and a little bit of where the paint was as well, just to get a cool design and texture. And I thought these looked pretty guy-like. I found these in my garage, just old ones that we're not using. I did let this layer dry, and then I came in with some of my iron oxide in the golden paint and then my silver in the Master's Touch. I like having silver or a metallic behind my alcohol ink prints as well, because it really makes those alcohol inks look kind of iridescent and shiny, and it's a really nice look. I really like how this print turned out with all the different layers and the tops of the screws and the gears and everything all together. The colors look really nice. This next one, I added a layer of my blending solution onto the gel plate first, and then I started adding in 2 of my pearl colors, an orange and a yellow, because pearls don't really blend well with just alcohol, so you have to use the blending solution for those, or they'll just kind of they'll get separated and it looks clumpy. So definitely use the solution for that one. And then on top of that, I started adding in my alcohol inks. For these next 3 prints, I'm just making colorful prints minus the blacks and the browns and the grays. So these won't have the acrylic paint first layer. I just wanted to have a few brighter colored ones, because when I'm making cards, I wanted to have a little bit of a variation of the prints that still have some of the design in it, so the gears, but don't have all of the darkness to them, because the darkness does get a little bit lost with the color and it's a little bit busy. So this was the one I pulled with just the oranges, yellows, and a little bit of green. Then I put hand sanitizer on my gel plate. I forgot about this technique. I hadn't used it in a few weeks, maybe even a month. But the hand sanitizer will really help move those alcohol inks around while you're adding them, and it'll keep them from creating that circle. And then I did the blending solution, and then I put my pearls on top of that and blended it all together. And as you're going, you can just add more alcohol or blending solution and more colors if it feels like there's open spaces, which is what I was doing here. And once I felt like there was a decent amount of color, I let it dry just a little. You don't want to let it completely dry. It still has to be somewhat wet in order to pull up a design on the alcohol inks. Once the alcohol is completely dry, then I can use my silver and then pull this print. I am pulling these prints with the 110 pound Nina white cardstock. Those go really well for die cutting and layering into my cards. So this one is much more of the cool tones, the blues and the greens. And so I wanted to make one more that has a combination of the cool colors and the warm colors together without the black or the brown. So for this one, I started with the hand sanitizer, and then I dropped in some of my cool and warm colors together. Even though orange and blue are contrasting colors, in alcohol inks, they tend to kind of keep their distance from each other unless you're dropping one into the other while it's wet, and they can kind of work pretty well together. They don't create too much of a muddy color if you kind of keep them just a little bit separated. I also had a color called Honeycomb, which is like a yellowish orange, and that one went really well with the greens and then blended into the blues. And I really like how the colors turned out on this print. I got a variety of the colors, and I think that this one will go really nice with the other prints that I had made. I had only made 2 of the darker colored prints, so I thought I should make one more, so I have 3 of the colorful prints and 3 of the prints with the black and the acrylic paint. On the back of this one, I had already dropped in a lot of my colors. Again, I was using all of the blues, greens, and oranges and yellows here. And then I started putting in my alcohol's blending solution. And the paint didn't seem to separate quite as bad. I just used the black for this layer, not the gray or the brown. And this black does seem to hold up pretty nicely with the alcohol inks over the top. And so here is my final print, and I think this turned out really cool. And again, this will go real nice over the top of or beside one of my bright and colorful prints here. But I still think they're all kind of like manly or guy-like because they still have those gears in them and the colors are pretty neutral. So here are the 3 darker ones together, and I really love these colors mixed in with the black. I think that looks really nice in the brown and even with the gray. Although the gray to me was the one that worked the least with these alcohol inks, so I don't know why. I don't know if it's the makeup of that paint that really just deteriorated when I tried to use it with the alcohols over the top. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but again, that's just part of my learning process for jelly printing and seeing what 2 kinds of mediums I can use together and which ones just don't work. I love working with the alcohol inks, of course. Just remember, if you're using alcohol inks on your own jelly plate, if you've never used them before, they will stain your jelly plate yellow. The most staining ones are going to be your yellows and your greens, and sometimes the blue ones as well, like the light blue. So just keep that in mind. But I hope you had fun watching, and stay tuned and I'll show you how I use these prints. I'll see you in the next video. Happy crafting, y'all.